During the Victorian era and Edwardian era, people loved a good murder mystery. People loved the gruesome and shocking side of things. I mean, this was a time when public hangings were a family event for the day. They were also much like society is today, where they loved a scandal, so when a case comes along that involves murder and a love triangle, people ate it up. This is the tragic murder of Elsie Sigel. In 1909, Elsie was a 19-year-old natural beauty who lived with her parents in a posh home in New York. Elsie was well known around New York. Her family, the Sigel family, was very respected, mostly because of her grandfather, Franz Sigel. Franz was a German immigrant and a famous Civil War general, a man that many soldiers looked up to and adored. Lincoln made sure Franz always received high-profile assignments. After the war, he became involved in politics and passed away on August 21st, 1902. 5 years later, on October 19th, 1907, a statue of Franz Sigel was unveiled in New York, with about 100,000 people attending the ceremony. Franz's second son, Paul Sigel, was a very wealthy man, and he had a wife named Anna, and Anna did what a lot of society women did back then, and she taught Sunday school. She taught Sunday school at St. Andrew's Church on 5th Avenue. Anna was very involved in missionary work, and the Sunday school she taught at was in Chinatown in New York City. In the late 1800s, many people from China came to America and viewed Sunday school as a great way to learn English. Anna would bring her daughter Elsie to her teachings, and because of this, Elsie developed a love for missionary work as well, and this made Anna very proud. Unfortunately, Elsie did not stay completely professional when it came to her work. She let her love life get in the way at times. When she was 18, she met a handsome 30-year-old man with the surname Ling or Lung. He used both. He also went by a few first names like Leon, Willie, and William, most referred to as Leon, so that's what I'll be calling him for this video. I live in New York, and one of the best things about New York is that it is a melting pot of so many different types of people. It is so diverse, but it is no secret that back in the early 1900s, there were large groups of very openly, disgustingly prejudiced people, and because of that, Elsie and Leon, they discussed their relationship and decided that it would be best if they kept it a secret from everybody because they were basically terrified of the backlash. Elsie's family, though, was not like that at all. They did not have that way of thinking. They didn't understand it, and they were very fond of Leon, especially Elsie's mother. Her parents actually let Leon stay with them for a period of time, and he would take them around Chinatown and give them a tour on occasion, and it was fine until Elsie started disobeying her parents' house rules. She would stay out late with him, they wouldn't come back some days. Yes, she was of age, but they still wanted her to obey their rules that they had in the household. On June 9th, 1909, Elsie disappeared from her parents' home at 109 Wadsworth Avenue, and 3 days later her father received a telegram from Washington, D.C. that read, "I'll be home by end of week. Don't worry," signed Elsie. Her parents were of course a little bit worried, but like I said before, she was of age, so they figured that she was just disobeying them again and she would be back eventually. On June 19th, 1909, Leon's cousin, who owned a chop suey restaurant on the bottom floor of the building at 782 8th Avenue, went to the West 47th Street police station to inform them that his cousin, who lived in the same building a few floors higher, had been missing for 6 days. For these 6 days, every few times during the day, he would go back, knock on the door. There was never an answer. Nobody ever said anything from the inside. He didn't really know any other way to get inside the apartment. He didn't want to bust down a door or break a window or trespass in any way. Policeman John Reardon accompanied him to the apartment, and when they got inside and they started looking around, what they found would stick with them for the rest of their lives. The room was vacant, besides a bed and a trunk that was bound with rope. Upon opening the trunk, they found the almost nude body of a young woman, doubled up and wrapped in a sheet. The woman had been deceased about a week, and the cause of death was strangulation. She had a thin cord wrapped around her neck, one most likely found on window shades. She was wearing a gold necklace and a pendant that had the initials PCS, most likely Paul Sigel's initials. They started talking to people who knew Leon, and they ended up talking to one of Leon's cousins, a man named Joe, and Joe told them that Leon had recently been seeing a woman named Elsie Sigel, so they decided to go pay a visit to the Sigel family. At first, her parents denied she was missing and claimed that she was simply out of town. After a little while, they finally convinced her father to identify her body. He acted indifferent. He couldn't verify if it was her or not and whether he recognized the jewelry. However, when they brought in her mother, she verified both the body and the jewelry had belonged to her daughter. The second that her mother realized that it was her daughter, she collapsed. She fainted. She couldn't deal with the fact that her daughter was dead and that she was gone and she was never coming back, and she eventually had to be hospitalized because of this. When it came to Leon, a man named Chung Sin lived in the same apartment as him. They were roommates, and this man disappeared at the same time as Leon, so police needed to track him down as well. Too much of a coincidence they disappeared at the same time after a murder occurred, so police knew something was fishy with this. Both Leon and Chung's photos were released in the newspapers, and police were determined to track down these two men and find out what exactly happened and try to solve this murder mystery. This was back in the early 1900s, so news like this didn't really spread to the entire country. It was basically just in New York, and people were completely fascinated by this story. It was tragic, and it was all that people were talking about for a long period of time. Police ended up speaking to a man named Chu Gain. This man admitted he had sexual relations with Elsie. He told police that after seeing Elsie for some time, he started receiving threatening letters. One read, "You know what will happen to you if you are seen with Elsie again. You'll be killed, and the girl too." So it's starting to look like there was some sort of a love triangle going on. Obviously, this letter was written out of jealousy. It was probably written by Leon. Everything was starting to line up. Everything was starting to make sense. People were starting to think that Leon had killed Elsie because she was unfaithful to him. But Leon and Chung were still missing, and they still had to find them. On June 20th, a man named Mr. Harvey Kennedy of Amsterdam, New York, saw a photo of Chung Sin in the newspaper and immediately recognized him as his new cook he had working at his restaurant. They brought him in for questioning. He admitted that he was Chung Sin, the man they were looking for, but he said that he had no involvement in Elsie Sigel's murder at all. It was discovered that on June 1st, 1909, 8 days before Elsie's disappearance, Leon called the West 152nd Police Station, talked to Lieutenant McGrath, and claimed that during a period of time when he was living with the Sigel family, he loaned Elsie's mother $300. There was some sort of misunderstanding, an argument arose, and he needed an officer to accompany him to the home so he could gather all his belongings and so someone of authority would be present to verify there were no issues. The officer went with him and everything went smoothly. A few days after finding the remains of Elsie, Paul Sigel was quoted saying, "I know that William Leon and Chu Gain, who conducts the Port Arthur restaurant, were in love with my daughter and that Leon was insanely jealous." On the evening of June 8th, there was a party at my house during my absence. Leon came to the party drunk. He called Elsie to one side and told her that if she had anything to do with Chu Gain, he would kill them both. Chu Gain talked to authorities and he told them that on June 9th he talked to Chung Sin, and Chung Sin told him that Leon said that he would leave the city if he had enough money for transportation out of New York. Chu Gain gave Chung Sin $260, which is a bit of money back then, to give to Leon so he could get out of the area. He figured that if Leon left, his life would be spared, because you have to remember, Chu Gain was seeing Elsie behind Leon's back, and Leon made it clear that if they continued this, he was going to kill them both. To further verify Mr. Gain and Elsie's relationship, he showed police a letter from her to him on the night of the party that read, "My dear friend, I don't want you to feel badly because Willie was here tonight. You know that I love you and you only, and always will. Don't mind Willie, although he is nothing to me now. I had to see him last night. I did not send for him. Your ever loving, signed, Elsie." But in the room where Elsie's body was found, there was also a letter written to Leon that read, "My dear Willie, I am writing this letter while Mother is away from home. She would not let me if she knew about it. Don't think, Willie, that I will ever give you up. I will always remember the good times we have had together. Please let me know if I can see you soon and how. With love, signed, Elsie." Now, obviously, Elsie Sigel's priorities were not in the right place. Her values were a little bit off. I mean, she was going behind Chu Gain's back. She was going behind Leon's back. But that doesn't mean she deserved such a horrific end to her life. Unfortunately, one of the people whose back she was going behind was not right in the head and wanted to seek revenge. He was the type of person who would want to punish her because of this. Instead of just seeing that she was unfaithful and just saying, okay, well, I'm going to leave her because of this, he decided to take his anger out on her and do it in a way that could never be undone. They spoke to Chung a bit longer, and here's one statement he gave police that he claimed happened that night. About 10:30 on the morning of June 9th, Elsie Sigel called to see Leon for the purpose of reprimanding him for his conduct at the party on the previous evening, and also to notify him not to call at the house anymore. I was downstairs and she went up to the rooms. After a while, I went upstairs, and when I went into one of our rooms, I heard a noise in the other room. The door was slightly ajar, and I looked through and saw Leon and Elsie struggling. I saw blood on her face, and I also saw a handkerchief up to her mouth. Elsie was thrown on the bed and lay motionless while Leon ripped off her clothing. He then covered her body with bed clothing and went to the closet and pulled out a trunk. I went into the room at this time and felt the girl's hand, and Leon said she was dead. I said it was dirty work and that I was going away. I gave him $200 of my money, and then I extorted $260 from Chu Gain, which I also gave him. I saw him put the body in the trunk. I stayed at my cousin's house after the murder. This was a man, though, that gave police a couple different stories, and some of them clashed. One of his original statements, he said that he witnessed the murder through a transom above the door, which is like a small window. And when police went to the apartment, there was no transom above the door, so obviously he was lying about that. Police figured that yes, he was lying about a few details, but he was definitely involved in the murder in some way. So because of that, he was held as a material witness on $10,000 bail. The final verdict was rendered on September 24th, 1909, that the said Elsie Sigel came to her death on the 9th day of June 1909 at 782 8th Avenue by asphyxiation, inflicted at the time and place aforesaid at the hands of Leon Lung, alias William Leon. After the verdict, they decided to release Chung Sin, and they were on the search for Leon. They still had to find him, but they were never able to, still to this day. There was a Secret Service agent that got a few tips, and he figured that Leon actually left to Canada, and then from Canada he went back to China and lived out the rest of his life. There are a ton of conspiracies when it comes to this case. One of the main ones is that Leon actually killed Elsie in Washington, D.C. and traveled back to the New York apartment with the trunk, which is crazy to think about, but that's one of the main theories, and that nobody noticed the trunk on his journey from Washington, D.C. back to New York, and that him and Chung Sin left the trunk in the apartment, gathered all their belongings, and left. There's also a huge theory that the woman in the trunk was not actually Elsie Sigel, that Elsie and Leon wanted to leave the country, so they made it look like she had been murdered so nobody would try to track her down, that it was just a look-alike, and that her and Leon left to China and lived out a happy life together. From my research, Elsie did like Leon, but it doesn't look like she was too committed to him, so I don't really think this theory adds up. There are a ton of theories, they go on, but none of them really help the case in today's time. I mean, it's been 109 years. It is basically solved. It's obvious what happened, but it's still unsolved. So I hope that you guys found that Oldies October case interesting. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. I wanted to share it more as a historical aspect over anything else, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.